Three. Hello, everyone. My name is Frankie Ho, and I am from a podcast called Moneytalk For Beginners. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 1. Today, we are here with Alex Fung from the RE/MAX Hallmark. Alex is an experienced realtor with obviously RE/MAX Hallmark, which is one of the biggest RE/MAX brokerage in the entire world. And welcome, Alex. Thank you for joining my podcast today. And I just want to thank you for your time, and let's just get started.
Hey, thanks, Frankie. I really appreciate, being on your podcast. I also want to, share as much information as I can to your listeners. And I'm also actually part of the Daryl King team. You can see here and over there, if you're watching video. Essentially, the Daryl King team, we're the #1 team in York region for the past 20 years. And I think top 10 in Canada pretty consecutively. But yeah, excited to be here, and let's get this show started.
Sounds good. So obviously, Alex, we'll start with the first typical question. What made you want to become a realtor?
Yeah, so it was actually interesting. So before I became a real estate agent, I started an e-commerce community group called GTA e-commerce. And essentially what that was that it was a community full of entrepreneurs looking to start a business to sell products online. Okay, it became one of the largest communities in Canada, and we had a lot of well-experienced entrepreneurs come in and share their experiences about selling products online. And so by having these in-person events, pre-COVID, I actually had some real estate agents come in to my events, listen to them, listen to the speakers, and they actually wanted me to help them with their digital marketing. So from there, I actually helped them, online marketing. I also helped them with the back end, research, this help with the paperwork. And that's how I kind of got my foot in the door and got a little taste of, real estate. Because before I started, I had no idea I wanted to actually become a real estate agent. I didn't have that exposure. And so when I finally made that leap to become a realtor, it wasn't that much of a leap already because I already did a lot of the work. And so I got really into it. I did, the online marketing, the lead acquisition, communicated with prospects, trying to convert them. And then, the rest is pretty much history.
So Alex, what I get from it, obviously you like the fact that you have the chase to get clients, build pipelines and all that stuff. But beside that, what is it I guess you really like to help clients, or is there anything else beside obviously being a realtor at the current moment is can be really lucrative? Beside that, is there anything else that inspired you to become a realtor?
Yeah, so actually there's two things to that. So first thing is, I get that facade out there, like it's not like real estate agents don't always make a lot of money. I'll be honest. Yes, there's commission. There's a commission 2.5% or 5% if you double end the transaction. But there are a lot of fees. Okay, I don't want to get into it, but there's essentially 6 or 7 different fees you got to pay when you do a deal, right? The commission splits, the taxes, the gas, the marketing, your time, and so just wanted to bring that out there. But of course, we do a lot of deals and, it adds up, right? So it's actually pretty good. You can make a good career out of it. But yeah, going to your question, what I really liked about real estate was the fact that, you're helping a family or some people, guide them through, one of the largest transactions probably in their entire life. It's pretty high stakes if you think like that. Right. It's not like, buying a piece of gum at a gas station. People don't really research that. They research on buying homes and, what's the process, and trying to eliminate as much fear as possible and educate them on what to expect. You know what I mean? And that's what I really, really like about it. Even with experienced, real estate investors, the industry changes, and being able to educate them is something that I really like doing and I'm pretty passionate about.
All right, sounds good. So what is your, when you help clients like obviously look for their dream home, like as a, for the first time home buyers or for investors, more like I guess real estate investors, what are they do? Are they typically looking for? Obviously, let's talk about I guess for the clients for the typical first time home buyers first, and then we'll go to the real estate investors.
Yeah, so the first time home buyer, there's actually a couple programs that actually help them when they purchase a home, right? There's government, incentives, right? When they first purchase their home. I don't want to go into too detail because it does change. And it can change, and I don't want to confuse your listeners. But yeah, there's incentives for them. But what they should really look for is, whether they can afford the property, right? Because real estate has been going bonkers, and especially with the whole pandemic that's going on, like it's just been going up and up, and it's a lot harder for people to, you know, purchase property. Like that's what it is, right? A general rule of thumb, depending on where you're trying to buy, right? And it's not just for first-time home buyers, but buyers in general, is that if you buy a place in Toronto, right, for let's just say 700,000, that 700,000 can get you more in other places, right, outside of Toronto, like whether it's GTA or Peel area or even Guelph, London, Niagara. Like it depends on where you're trying to go. And first-time home buyers have to really understand what they care about the most. Do they care about convenience? Do they care about the lifestyle? Versus versus the investors, where what they care about is what's the best ROI or return on investment that they can have when they purchase a property, right? So if they buy a property, like, are they going to rent it out right away? Are they going to fix it up? Are they going to get into pre-construction, right? So there's a lot of different ways that investors can think about it, but at the end of the day, they want to make as much money as possible.
That makes sense. So essentially, obviously, a lot of clients, I obviously they come up to you and say, "Hey, look, I want this is my down payment. This is what I want to buy and stuff like that." How do you
Yeah.
keep them kind of grounded and be more realistic? Because as a potential client or as someone who's the first time buying home or even bought a home before, but
Yeah.
mostly the first time home buyers, they might have some unrealistic, I guess, ideas of what they can afford or what they can get because everyone wants everything, but also wants to pay the minimum as
Yeah,
possible, obviously, right? So I'm
of course.
assuming most of those clients, obviously, when they come to you, they'll be like, this is what I'm looking for. But you probably have to bring them back to reality a bit sooner. And then, or after a couple of houses, they might have noticed that hopefully that their idea of what they can get might be out of reach. And of course, for real estate investors, hopefully it'd be a bit easier for you because they might be more experienced in terms of buying houses. And also, I guess you have to help them do the math to make sure the return on investments does make sense, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So for first-time home buyers, like how I ground them and manage expectations is I show them the data, right? And I tell them right away. Um, I That's the thing, right? Like for me, I tell my clients the truth, and it's different than telling them something that they want to hear all the time, right? My job is to educate them, tell them what they can actually afford or comfortably afford and what they can't, right? Because the government may increase interest rates, and the last thing I want for them is that they can't afford mortgage payments, and then the bank takes over the property and forecloses it. You know what I mean? And so for me, being able to be honest, show them the data, and that it's not just me telling them something, it's actually what the market is telling us, right? um, and that's how I tell my clients, whether it's first time home buyers or not. This is the data, this is what's available, this is your price range. Obviously there's a disconnect.
Of course, of course. So obviously, honesty and integrity it's one of your key differentiating compared to other realtors. Obviously, I'm not saying all realtors are dishonest. It's just
No.
that it's something that you hold a very high top priority in. So is beside those two things I just mentioned, obviously there are a lot of realtors out there at the moment. How
Yeah.
do you differentiate yourself compared with other realtors beside the two very important priorities I already just mentioned?
Yeah.
How do you, I guess, show your value, I guess you can say, to potential clients and to existing clients that you're dealing with right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, like when in the very beginning where you introduced me, right? So I'm part of Remax Hallmark, and essentially what that's a brokerage from underneath Remax, right? So in terms of the brand Remax, they account for about 30% of all like transactions in the Toronto Real Estate Board. It's quite a sizable amount. But in terms of a brokerage level, Remax Hallmark accounts for about 10 to 12%, I believe, of all real estate transactions in the Toronto Real Estate Board. And what that means though specifically is that we have a lot of access to buyers and sellers. Okay. And essentially every 15 minutes, Remax Hallmark does a deal. Okay. And so there's a lot of negotiations that happen at the office. And so what differentiates, me specifically is I get a lot of exposure to the negotiations that's going on, and I get a lot of off-market properties. So one of the best way to compete is to not compete. And what that means is having access to properties that aren't available to the public, right? So there's all these free tools that you can find online where you can find all this real estate properties, but that's public, right? That's like the Red Sea, where you're competing with 10, 20 different offers, right? For off-market properties, there's a lot less. Okay. And I'm not going to get into detail of why sellers want to go off markets, but there's a couple of reasons. And that's, you essentially want to know the properties that are about to go live. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. The second thing is, again, I'm part of the Daryl King team. And in terms of our team, collectively, we have well over 200 years of experience, right? Lots of negotiations going on in the office. Daryl's pretty much a veteran, right? He's been in the industry for about 33, 35 years, done a lot of deals. Like, I think it was like over $5.5 billion worth of transactions, right? And so it's a lot of different transactions, a lot of different scenarios that can happen where I have access to him, ask him for any advice if I have any questions, and being able to have not just him, but have leverage on the team. So the team itself, the Daryl King team, I have access to a marketing manager. I have a deals team actually. I have a pre-construction team, right? So a typical real estate agent doesn't have access to that. So what that means is I have more selection for pre-construction projects because we have a pre-construction development. So right now we have over 100 different projects all over Ontario. Okay, so for real estate investors or home buyers that want to buy a new home, we have access to those for VIP, right? So we save clients, 10, 15, 20, even $50,000. Okay, as opposed to if they went directly to the builder. The second thing is, I have more leverage when it comes to time. So I have more time to sell homes or help clients buy homes because I have a marketing person, I have a deals person that helps with the back end paperwork. Okay. So typically as a real estate agent, if I'm a solo agent, I would have to do all that stuff myself, which means I have less time to dedicate on the deals. You know what I mean?
That makes sense.
So the third thing is, just being able to have the negotiation, the experience to help leverage and get the best deal for the clients, right? So not every agent's the same. And I'm glad you actually asked that because, it's public numbers, you can search it online, about, 35% of agents, do zero deals, right? So right now there are about, 60 to 65,000 different agents out there, but about 35% of them do zero deals. You know what I mean? And 44% do 1 to 5 deals a year. So if you think about it, that's about like 70 to 80% of all real estate agents do less than 5 deals a year. Okay. So like I mentioned earlier, where real estate transaction is probably one of the biggest transactions that people do with their, that they're going to come across with their life. Would you want someone that's, done less than 5 deals a year, or would you rather have an experienced individual or team to help you get the best deal out there? You know what I mean? So for our team specifically, we've done over, I think, 500 different deals this last year alone, right? I think the couple of years before we did 700 deals, we did 1,000 deals the year before that. Like, we have a lot of experience and we have a lot of off-market properties as well. You know what I mean? And we have a big database of buyers. So whether you're a seller looking to, sell your property at the highest possible price, we can actually help with that with a list of buyers already. But also, of course, if they want to, sell their property publicly, then we can help that as well. You know what I mean? So it's essentially, that's the good thing about the sellers. For buyers, you want to have these off-market properties. You want to have that access, that inventory, right? That not everybody knows about.
Right, of
Does
course.
that answer your question, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's very lots and lots of very valid reasons to go with a experienced realtor, and of course also a full-time realtor. But obviously there, based on my experience, obviously I know that if you're the buyer, you're not the one paying for the, I guess, the realtor 5% fee, and of course the seller is gonna be like, hey, do I have to pay the full 5% realtor fee and stuff? So I'm assuming there's going to be clients that will be like, hey, can I have a discount or something? Can I have some like cash back or something to give back
Yeah.
to them because they feel like it's a very expensive, fee to pay. How do you deal with these clients, and how do you justify saying, hey, look, I know this 5%, it might seem a lot, but I'm actually saving you on this and this and then this, which makes up for the 5% fee, or even just to give you cash back, my service might be not as good and stuff like that. How do you make sure that or make sure the client feels or thinks that the 5% realtor fee is 100% worth it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, right? So I'm not gonna discredit any agent that decides to, lower their, commission fee, right? That's up to them. That's a personal decision on their end. For us specifically, it's not that hard to convince sellers to pay, whether it's 5% or 6% sometimes, because we actually offer a lot of value. So how I was kind of mentioning earlier, leveraging our experience, right, our marketing, and our actual big list of buyers, right, it really helps. But the additional thing though is that what I mentioned earlier, where I leverage time. So I have assistants, I have a deals person, all that stuff, which means I actually have more time to promote the listings. So not only do we leverage online marketing, right, but I actually physically let all your neighbors know that the property is available. And the reason why I do that and I consistently follow up with them is because about 1/4 of all transactions account for the neighbors, whether it's their friends they know, their family, co-workers, colleagues, right? And so being able to follow up with neighbors, with other agents 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, you're calling them 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, emailing them 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, because sellers think that it's agents would, it'd be very easy for listing agents, but I actually put a lot of pressure on myself to get the most amounts for the sellers, because I'm physically doing the work, right? I'm leveraging time. I'm using my time to drive up the price, get the most, the best deal, best offer out there. And it's not necessarily even just the price, right? But it has to actually align with the seller's timelines, their needs, right? Sometimes they may want to sell right away, sometimes they don't. So being able to find the buyer that matches their timelines and their contingencies and their price is something that we do quite well, right? You can actually Google us and type in Duro King, and you can see how big our team is. And the staff have been really, really good. Pretty much I message anybody if I have any questions, at 10 o'clock, and they'll respond right away. And what that means is once that gets out the address right away, I can focus on other things, right? And it's just less thinking on my end and more doing, more action taking, more knocking on doors, more cold calling, just to get more awareness that the property is available. Because it was pretty interesting. I had a deal where I was listing a property in Markham, Thornhill, and it's I notified the neighbors pretty much 3 times. I had each. Okay, so that's about, I think that was probably close to about 1,500 doors. Okay, and I called them and I emailed them multiple times, right? And you know what's funny, because I ended up getting a buyer to buy the property at the terms that the seller wanted, right? It wasn't even close. So if I was a typical agent, I would typically I would probably just stick a sign on the floor, on the ground, and that's it, right? Expect, the MLS to do the magic. But if I did that, I wouldn't have gotten the best deal for my seller. You know what I mean?
That's
And
good.
so that's how I justify my price, because we sell for the highest possible price on the terms that they want, right? If you do, a brokerage that's, or an agent that discounts their fees, at the end of the day, they're thinking of, all right, I got this listing, great. Now I got to find another listing, right? And that's it. They're going to do the minimum amount of work. Whereas, if I'm getting compensated the right amount, I got to make sure that I do the best job for them. You know what I mean? And so you need to think of it that way too, because if you pay an agent a discounted amount and they have a client that's willing to pay them more, then you're essentially putting yourself in an awkward position. You know what I mean? You got to think of it that way too, because when we have a long list of clients, as long as, our value, they appreciate our value, and they're willing to, compensate us and believe in us and trust us that we're going to do the best amount we can for them, then that's what we'll do. We're going to use, our time intelligently to get them the best deal possible.
That sounds good, Alex. So obviously, Alex, you have to go to door, you have to hand out flyers, talk to neighbors. Obviously, when you go to either if you're representing a seller or the buyer, you'll take down, well, the seller, I'm assuming you take potential buyer or let potential buyer in to look at the seller's property. And then obviously if the buyer, I'm assuming you take them to the properties and you also help them look at things to be to look out for, like maybe some areas, the basement, some areas there might be water or some other damages, or I guess that those are some of the stuff you'll be looking at. But obviously most of those stuff like inspection and stuff like that, there'll probably be an inspector who goes in to look at it in more detail. But those are obviously some of the stuff that you do also on the side for your clients to make sure that you give the best value to your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually going to your question even deeper, right? Like, why not sell your home yourself, right? Just to save yourself that commission part. And actually, studies have been done, you know, and you know, these sellers are called, for sale by owners, right? That's what we call them in the real estate industry. And not a problem. Anyone that wants to sell their property, they can. It's their property; they can do what they want. But typically they sell their home for about 20% less than they would have with an agent, right? So the reason why is just mostly because of the marketing. Not enough people know about the property. And then also the negotiations. Okay. What happens actually is when you try to list your property online as yourself, as a homeowner, you're going to get, hundreds of calls, right? But they're not from people you want to hear from. They're actually from agents saying that, we have clients that want to buy the property, but, you need to compensate us. You know what I mean? And so this drags on, and it actually gets very exhausting for the homeowner that wants to sell it themselves. If you think about it, if you're working at a job, you're getting calls every day saying, hey, I have a buyer, I have a buyer, I have a buyer, and in reality, they actually, majority of the time, they don't. They're just saying that just to get you to talk to them and try to get you to list with them. That's the main objective. Okay. Not saying all the time they don't have a buyer, right? But majority of them don't. And you need to consider that, right? Your time is valuable. I get that, you want to save that, 2.5%, right? Or maybe even 3 or 4%. But the agents need to offer liquidity, essentially, right? Liquidity as in helping the transaction, close. And it's one of those things where it sounds nice, right?
Yeah.
Theoretically, but in reality, it's not. When you go through that, imagine getting calls at 10 p.m. in the evening. I have a buyer, or someone's agents would say, you can't do this without me. Your marketing sucks. They get all this negativity, and eventually, for sale by owners, actually just list with agents, and they could have just saved themselves a headache in the beginning just to do that, right?
I guess the problem is
Yeah.
this was obviously a lot of us, especially if we're not in the real estate or realtor industry itself, a lot of us probably thinking, okay, 5%, this is how much my property is worth. This is how much I'm saving by myself. But I'm assuming a lot of us that are not in the industry didn't really consider the time that it takes to actually list yourself, how much marketing is involved, and how much is after. If you notice that your property is sitting there for months, how depressing it can get. Maybe just listing with the realtor will be a lot easier, even though you have to pay the realtor fee, but in the end, it saves you a lot of time, which is
Yeah.
a very big benefit that people should consider. And also, of course, most people would have a full-time job. So if you also have a full-time job, and if they have kids or pets and dogs or something like that, to also take care of, it might be super time consuming. So if there's any listeners out there, consider the facts before you think about just the dollar sign. Because dollar sign is just one of the factors that you should consider in life, but you also have to consider, is it worth your time to do that too, of course.
Yeah. And also too, though, you got to consider too, that if you don't go with an agent, you sell your property about 20% less, right? So if even though you're saving, you'd say, 2.5% or 5%, you try to save 5%. That's not going to happen. But if you try to, right, but you're selling your property less by 20%. So in reality, you're really down. You know what I mean? So you're going through all that additional work just for less. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If overall is less than 20%, that's worse than you just going straight to a realtor.
Well, yeah, exactly. Now, if people, again, if they do decide to do it themselves, that's their, that's their thing, right? That's what they want to do, then go ahead. Just understand the drawbacks on it. Maybe, if you want to do it, you got to make sure, number 8, you have your own buyer that's credible. Okay, that's very important, credible. Because you don't want to have, close a deal and then it's supposed to close in 3 months, but the financing falls through or they back out. And there's all these issues that can happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, think about. And 3 months later, a lot can change in the real estate market. Like what if the properties actually start dropping at that time frame? Then not only did you lose a deal, now you're getting new offers, a couple months later at less. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things to consider, but if you have your own buyer that's credible, you have a lot of free time, then you can definitely explore trying to sell it yourself. You can try to get a lawyer to draft up the paperwork, do marketing yourself, do the calls yourself, right? All that physical work you need to get done.
So
If you have the time, then go ahead, try it, right?
yeah, of course. But overall, what is actually the typical like home purchase like process, or what does it look like usually? Like you just mentioned a lot of very good stuff, like you kind of actually mentioned all the steps that they have to do already, especially the people just try to sell their own house. They notice how much steps or how many things they actually have to go through in order to sell a place. But just for all the other people that either A, haven't bought a place yet, or
Yeah,
B, they have a place but they want to sell it and buy another place, and they haven't done that for a while, so they might not know the process, the new process or the old process, or even any of the process anymore, because they have a realtor before that handle that for them, or just someone that's just recently came from another country and they might not know how does the buying and selling works in, I guess,
of
the
course.
Ontario or in Canada. Can you just go through what is a typical home purchase or home selling would look like?
Yeah, for sure. So the first step, if you're trying to buy a property, you need to figure out how much you can afford, right? So speaking with a lender can really help. So some of the things you're going to look for is, your pay stubs, your statements, your tax returns, and so once you're able to provide some of us, these forms for them, these documents, they're going to be able to tell you, how much you're probably going to be able to afford that they're going to lend you. Typically, it's about 4 to 5 times your gross. So if you're making, 100,000 in a year, you're probably going to get, max about 400 to 500,000 for a mortgage. That's just a rough estimate. Of course, I'm not, a lender, but based on my experiences and based on my conversations with lenders, it's about 4 to 5 times. So once they've, number one, they got the pre-approval done. Number two is really figure out what they really want, right? Do they want to live in Toronto? Do they want to live in Markham, Richmond Hill, Vaughan? What kind of lifestyle they want, right? Where are they working? Are they able to work at home, right? Something that it's more personal to them, right? If they are, starting a family, school is something a really important factor for them that you should consider. And once they kind of narrow down, kind of think about what they kind of want, they can definitely reach out to, real estate agents to get more information. And then, once they connect with the real estate agents, they can find some properties online. Hopefully their agents have off-market properties as well. That's not available to the public as well. Make sure once you go with an agent, they're explaining to you what the contract states, right? So a lot of my friends and my, that went with agents in the past before I became an agent myself, they would sign some paper documents, but they wouldn't know what they're signing. Like the agent themselves should be telling them what they're signing, right? What the contract actually says. So there's some agents, you want to that some agents that don't explain this. And it's actually really important that they do. Okay. So for buyers specifically, what's the difference between a client relationship and a customer relationship? And this is very, very important, right? So a customer relationship is where you can think of it like an a la carte, right? You pay for what you order essentially, right? So you can get an agent to say, hey, I want you to show me properties, but that's it. I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars. Now, not every brokerage is going to accept that. They might just say, hey, we don't do customer relationships. We only do client relationships. And client relationship is more where we have a legal obligation to ensure our clients are taken care of. We're putting their interests ahead of ours, right? So for Remax Hallmark, where I mentioned earlier, we account for 12% of Toronto real estate transactions. We deal with a lot of sellers. So hypothetically, Frankie, if you came to me and say, hey, Alex, I want you to be my agent. I only want a customer relationship. And I'm like, okay, sure. And you tell me this information, okay? You tell me, how much you're willing to pay, the max, why you're looking to buy, when do you want to buy, okay? And we find a property that my brokerage sells that's currently listed, okay? I have an actual legal obligation to the seller, not you, because you're the customer, right? So that's a very, very important form. And you need to explain that to people, right? So when I explain that to them, I make sure, hey, here's the differences, right? The legal obligation, the legal implications, right? That's the first form. The second form is the buyer representation agreement form, where assuming you become an actual client and you need to fill that out, well, what does that entail, right? So you got to make sure your agent explains that to you. And same with the listing side, right? So the agent should always disclose, what the difference is between the buyer and the client and the customer relationship, but also the listing agreement. Like what's required by the seller and what will the listing agent do for you, right? So explaining these legal terminologies and what they're signing is very, very important, especially if you're a first-time home buyer, right? And a first-time home seller. Right. So you need to make sure you pick the right agent, right? So after you get your pre-approval, you get an agent, do your research, figure out what you want, and then you start looking for homes. And let's just say, going back to your other question, going to a buyer perspective, once you find a home, you make an offer, you get rejected a couple of times, you make another offer, you get accepted, you win the home, but the actual real job starts now. Okay. What I mean by that is just because you won, your deal got selected and you beat out, 10, 15, 20 other offers, you actually have to fulfill all the contingencies, all the requirements for the deal to close by certain deadlines. And so you want to make sure when you choose the agent, he or she's going to help guide you to fulfilling all these obligations within the contract. Because if you pick the wrong agent, for example, or you try doing it yourself, you might actually lose $10, $15, $20,000 for situations where you could have prevented yourself, not including the delays in timeline. You know what I mean? And so that's pretty much it, like from A to Z. Get pre-approved, speak to an agent after you know how much your budget is, find some properties, whether it's off markets, on markets, for sale by owner, pre-construction projects, fixer uppers, and then make an offer, right? If it gets accepted, great. Then the real work begins. Make sure you fulfill all your legal obligations, whether it's getting pre-approval, like getting your financing in order, right? Making sure you have your deposit ready, And that's pretty much it, right? Like that's from the buyer's point of view, right? Given today's markets. For sellers, they have some obligations, but it's not really much compared to buyers.
So obviously, right now it's more of I guess, a seller's market. There's not a lot of supplies compared to a lot of demands. There's a lot more people chasing to buy a place than actually people selling a place. So obviously, the typical time or day or number of days that's sitting in the market for the seller is probably not a lot. How long? Right now, how long does a typical buyer usually needs to go through how many house properties or either a condo unit or a house before they actually land on something that is, I guess, up to their standard or up to something that is set pretty happy with, and that's will be good for you and for your clients.
Okay, so typically, it takes about, honestly, it's kind of hard to say, but depending on, it's very heavily dependent on the client, right? What their budget is, what's in the market. Because you're right. Right now, the inventories are very, very low with very low interest rates, right? So the Bank of Canada, they recently said that they're going to keep the rates the same, but they're going to increase it in March, right? So even though when they increase it, it's not going to go a lot, like is what I suspect. It's probably going to go, 0.25% increase. But yeah, so given the low interest rates, low inventory, it causes the prices to go very, very high right now, right? Markets have gone crazy in terms of how much they've gone in. Like it's like the growth in outside of Toronto has been a lot higher than in Toronto. And so it may take a couple of times for buyers to make offers and get it accepted. Right now, the thing is, again, it's not about just winning the deal. It's making sure that you can afford the place and that you get lending. And so you be expected to make a couple offers, right? Don't expect to win the first one. If you do, then you're very, very lucky. I've helped a client where they went with an agent and, they made an offer, they got rejected, and then they stopped, looking for a home. And then in the end, they signed with me and I helped them get a place, right? On our first try. And it's definitely a process for buyers. It can be very grueling, especially if you're making 5, 6, 7 different offers and you're getting rejected again and again and again, right? And again, it's not necessarily about the highest possible price. It has to just ensure that fits the seller's requirements, their timelines, what they want, right? So price is definitely up there, right? But also what else is important to them, right? When do they want to move out, for example, right? That's something that's very important to look at, right? Are they looking to retire? And when are they going to retire? Then if they're going to retire this date, then maybe, you can take over the property after you retire. You know what I mean? Like you want to make sure it aligns with their schedule and their timelines and their obligations.
Right.
And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Sounds good. So just one final part for the client listeners who might be potential clients out there. Is there any remaining friendly advice you can give to the potential clients or anyone that's looking to buy a place?
So if you want to buy a property, you got to ask yourself what kind of, number one, what's your affordability? What can you afford? Number one. Number two, what kind of property are you looking for, right? Are you looking for a pre-construction project? Are you looking for a fixer-upper? Are you, looking for a home just to, lock and key? You just go in and, turnkey, sorry, and you just move in. That's it. Like you gotta ask yourself that. Now the pre-construction, the cost per square foot has been going up than typical homes that have been built right now, just because, the price of lumber has gone up exceptionally very high. Price of labor, all these factors, a lot of demand on a supply. That's a big factor as well. And so you got to think about what do you want, how much you can afford, and can your agent give you that selection, right? Give you the negotiation power that you need, right? So those are things I would highly, highly recommend that they think about, and just make sure you can afford it. Very, very important.
Sounds good. Obviously, being able to afford a place is very important. But if there's obviously there's a lot of areas that are relatively expensive at the current moment, how do you suggest these other clients that might not have the highest income to still be able to find a place, or I guess you say buy a place for themselves or and for their family?
Yeah, so what I've been seeing is a lot of families, a lot of first-time homebuyers specifically, they rely on their parents to help them with the deposit or purchasing the home, right? That's the first thing. That's an option. Second option is I've seen people, they're working with their friends to help get a place together. So they get some exposure to the real estate market, right? Some. That's better than nothing. But if you do that, it can get complicated. So definitely speak to a lawyer about that. That's pretty much it in terms of affordability, right? So and also save, save as much as you can. It's definitely tough right now, even for deposits, but making sure that you do as much as you can in your own power to put you in a better position to purchase, right? So saving money, number one, yes. Number two, see if there's any other financing options. If family and friends don't work out, you might be able to get a B lender or C lender that can offer you capital, but at a higher rate. Okay, that's another option as well. That's pretty much it. And also too, making sure that you get a property that you can afford, whether it's smaller than you really wanted initially, because things have changed drastically, right? Buying home 20, 30 years ago is a lot different than buying home now.
Of course.
Interest rates back then were very, very high, but the home prices were a lot less.
Of course. So based on my experience, because when I bought my house a couple of years ago, so essentially for me, I went to the bank. I did a pre-approved for a mortgage certificate, I can. This is for example, I can afford to buy a place that's 550K, but I personally think it makes more sense to buy a place that's cheaper, so then I can save that money for the cash flow for each month from my paycheck, so I can use it to do for other stuff, like maybe buy other stuff, invest the money just for daily living, emergency funds, whatever it is. That's what my wife and I decide to do. Would you think that's a good idea given the current market, because there's not a lot of supplies out there for housing, or do you think that this idea will be kind of hard to implement at the current market though?
So really, in terms of what you're doing, I think you're just spot on. Like it's not cheap to get into real estate, right? There's ways of investing. You want to beat inflation essentially, right? Like inflation's like very, very high right now, especially how the interest rates are so low. And so whether you invest money into real estate or stocks and bonds, that's something, or cryptocurrency, like that at least you're not losing money in the long run, right? For example, if you put money in, if you just put your money in a bank right now, you're getting maybe 1%, maybe 2% if you're lucky, right? And so if you put it into stocks, for example, or crypto, and even in real estate, right? It's as long as you're making more and you're outpacing inflation, then you're good. But you got to also consider the risk that you're taking, right? If you buy something like cryptocurrency, the risk is very, very high relative to stocks, bonds, and real estate, right? It can go higher, but you can also lose your money. So you got whatever you invest in, you got to make sure you're comfortable in losing.
Of course. So let's that's obviously most of the topic we talk about are for like primary residents or home buyers, that people for living in the place that they bought for themselves. Let's talk about for the real estate investors or people who want to become real estate investors. There's a strategy, or there's a book I read. It's called The Blue Pockets for Rental Property, and one of the main strategies called BRRRR or BRRRR. So BRRRR. So where you buy a place, you renovate it, and you rent it out, and then you essentially repeat the process again. Given the current expensive Toronto housing market and obviously the interest rate might increase, do you think it's still a viable strategy, or how should you advise these real estate investors or potential real estate investors? How should they use this strategy now, or how they should maybe change it up just so they can make sure they have a positive cash flow or they still have a proper margin in the end from
Yeah.
their.
So there's a couple ways of doing it, right? And I agree, like that book, it's tried and true. It's really tough to get a fixer upper home in Toronto right now. Everybody's doing this, and so they're not afraid to, buy a rundown property, fix it up, and then try to sell it, right? So for first time investors, number one, you want to go in with not just yourself, but with ideally experienced individuals, experienced real estate investors already. That's the first advice I would give. Just so that you get exposure, you're learning from somebody that's more experienced, and you're reducing your risk, right? And also, you're gonna learn things that you didn't think that you didn't even know that you needed to know, right? So that's very important. Getting that experience, leveraging people's knowledge. And so fixer uppers, yes, it's definitely possible. Maybe look outside of Toronto, GTA, look outside. Also buying, pre-construction projects is very, it's not necessarily good on the cash flow right away, but, depending on whether you're Canadian or not, you can just put 20% down in the first year. And once it's built, then you owe the remaining balance, right? So for condos specifically, they take anywhere from 3 to 5 years to build, depending on how tall they are. So the first year you put 20% down, right? Let's just say the property, the unit is 500,000, right? A condo, 500,000, you put in 100,000 in, right? And then year 3, let's say year 4, it's done. So then you owe the remaining 400,000. Now within that time frame, within that four years, right, properties have gone up in price. So even though in a cash flow perspective, right, it's not as favorable compared to renting it out right away, but you're accruing all this equity over the course of 4 years, even though you only put in 100,000 or 20% down, in year 1. So you're not paying any property taxes because you don't own it yet, right? So you don't have to pay any capital gains yet because you didn't sell it, right? You're not paying any maintenance fees because it's not built yet, right? So there's a lot of that's another way of getting into real estate, right? So you can flip it, yes, right? You can get in pre-construction, yes, right? But yeah, there's a lot of different ways of doing it. I think that's, there's no one way of specifically doing it, but I totally agree. Like your book that you've read, it's pretty, it's on point for sure.
Yeah. Obviously, when I read that book, the housing price in that book is actually really cheap in comparison. So it looks like it's a very easy way to implement the strategy. But it seems like in Toronto it might be harder. So you might have to work together with a couple of people just to buy a place, renovate it, rent it out for a couple of years, wait for it to appreciate in equity or in value, and then refinancing. You repeat the process does make a lot more sense. It will be harder compared to cheaper real estate areas, but I think in the end it's still doable. It just be a bit harder to do in the end. So overall, Alex, I have only one, I guess one more question to ask you before we close it up. So for yourself as a realtor, what is the best and the worst part of being a realtor?
The best part is, helping people get a property or sell a property that fits their timelines and that fits their requirements, that fits their wants and needs, right? So being able to impact their life like that is very, very rewarding for me. That's the one thing I really like, and being able to interact with a variety of backgrounds in Canada. I love it. Like, it's a diverse culture, right? In Toronto, Ontario, Markham, it's great. It's great. What I don't like, I would say that there's a lot of anxiety that you'd have to deal with as an agent, right? So, let's just say, deals don't close, and it's something that you couldn't have controlled as an agent, right? You're helping the buyer or seller do something. Like, you're advising them to do it. You're guiding them through the process, but for whatever reason, something happens, right? Whether it's not necessarily your client, but it could be like a lawyer or an appraiser that doesn't go in your favor, right? So that's something that you can't control, and that has a lot of anxiety, right?
Right.
And I feel that, whenever I want to go on vacation, I tend to get very, very busy right before it, so that's could be a good thing, but also could be a bad thing as well. But yeah, that's why I'd say is probably the thing that I don't look forward to in real estate.
That's a very valid point. No one really thinks about that. All I think about is the realtor making a lot of money, and at the moment, unfortunately. But hopefully, through this different podcast, it will change some people's opinion about just being dealing with the realtor and being in the real estate industry itself. So thanks, Alex, for joining me today on the Money Talks for Beginners podcast. So if any listeners out there that wants to hear more or talk to Alex, how should they contact you?
Yeah, so they can contact me at alex.fung@darylking.com. They can give me a call at 647-968-4129, or they can just hit me up on, Instagram or Facebook at Remax Alex Fung. And that's pretty much it.
Sounds great, Alex. It was nice talking to you, and hopefully we can talk later on.
Thanks a lot, Frankie. I appreciate it. Talk to you later. Take care.
Take care.